it's not, I don't think it's easy for people to say this thing sucks and this is why it sucks and you can do better. Like, I don't think that that's a common thing. I think that takes like, and to stand on that conviction too.
Yeah, I guess I don't think it's a problem necessarily. It's the way you go about it.
Okay.
You know, I think especially founders should have strong convictions and should have a high level of, like a high bar for their team.
Yeah.
But if you're constantly like, every little thing they're doing is bad, right? There's a way to approach that. And maybe he wasn't maybe he wasn't micromanaging them to the point where it was those small details.
Yeah.
Because all we really hear about is like these big temper tantrums that blow up. But I really do think there's like a way to approach it where you can have high standards and do it in a way that people feel like good about putting forth like their best effort instead of ruling by fear. I think a lot of it was like, oh shit, I'm gonna lose my job. I'm worried that if I don't do this, like I'm gonna get fired. I don't know if you get the best results out of people that way. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't think you do. I don't think you do. But I do think that being very stern is. I think that that's taken for granted as well, as being the enemy in the room. Like, one thing that going back to my freshman basketball, back in my day. No, but my one thing that my coach did really well, because he was a military guy, West Point, all that stuff. Yeah, he made himself the enemy early on. Right. So we all bonded as a team. Right. And he was very good to not attack people for things that weren't tied to basketball or
that's also
court
good
stuff, right?
Yeah.
It was more about like the game in the business world to be the product and less about the people, right?
Yeah.
And so, but he was somebody where it's like we'd go there and we'd be like, man, if we mess up right now, there's going to be repercussions. And it's every little thing he would stay on us. But it ended up paying out. And so like that's not something that I'm aware that if he was aware of that. Now another
All right, we are back live.
What's going on, y'all?
The first drive.
2026.
2026, starting the year off strong.
Yes.
I love it.
Man, okay, so we are going into Steve Jobs today. Obviously, it's titled by the thumbnail and the title. But before we do that, why don't we give some Constance updates and talk about what we've been doing there?
Yeah, I mean, we have some really big things planned in Constance for 2026.
Yes.
And a lot of those are going to come at you quick and fast, and you're going to be hearing about these not only on this channel, but you also, if you guys are going to follow me or Tendo individually, we have our channels listed below. I'll be making updates every single week as we start pushing out features that we've designed in-house and getting it out to you guys. So we're really excited about that. A couple I was working on today that I'm really happy about, you know, just kind of moving the platform forward. Allowing people to send and receive emails, and I know some of the design stuff is going to be pushed out soon, which I'm really happy about.
Yeah, I'm really liking how the product is starting to come together. It's starting to become more cohesive, and really match the vision of what we want to put out there and how we aim to help different entrepreneurs, because that's what Constance was built for, and that's the way that we're utilizing that technology, is to help different people explore entrepreneurship, explore their creativity, and turn that into a business in the easiest, most straightforward way possible.
Less than 5 minutes.
Less than 5 minutes for you to be able to turn your passion into a profit and at least take that first step. Yes. I think that we're moving into a time right now where that's going to be more of the norm in terms of how people support themselves, is leveraging their passions, interests, experience, knowledge, and creativity to start businesses. It's way more accessible now than it was in the past. Yes. And of course, on this podcast, we're exploring different entrepreneurs across time. But I think that all of those people would agree that fundamentally leveraging your mind, leveraging your creativity, leveraging your experience, interests, passions are the way, that's the avenue to becoming a successful entrepreneur. So I'm thankful that I live in a time where it's more accessible.
Yes.
And I'm very excited for this next year, because I think we have a lot of big goals, and I think that they're very much within sight. So
yep, I love it. All right, cool. So diving into
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs.
Where do we want to start with Steve Jobs? Because this is such a revered name. I know
everyone knows Steve Jobs, right?
Yeah, everybody knows Steve Jobs. We've heard. And he's somebody that's gone into the lore of entrepreneurship. A lot of people claim him to be the most important entrepreneur of the 1900s.
Do they?
Right
Okay.
up there with Steve Jobs, Henry Ford, which
Oh, wow.
is such a status. And I think when I look around now, I mean, I have an iPhone, I have a Apple Watch,
Yeah.
I have AirPods.
MacBooks.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many
Yeah.
different things that are attributed to Steve Jobs. Not only that, but like we look at animation today, Pixar, and how he had such a critical role in creating like helping the company and giving those animators the technologies and then also the funding to be able to revolutionize animation and the way that we tell stories. So he's impacted so much of today's world that I don't know, it's kind of wild when you like peel back all the things that he really contributed towards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot out there, and it's continuing today. Apple is, I don't know, would you say they've lost their original, feel and I don't
ethos,
know, kind of, yeah, maybe that's a good word for it. Like their ethos, their
character,
their guiding light, whatever that is. It seems like I mean, they've been turning it around. I'll say there was a period in the 2000s, after 2010, I want to say, because Steve, Jobs died in 11, where I just felt like they kind of lost their way a little bit. And it was just a stark contrast between what I remember Steve Jobs, at all these events, and the way that I can kind of view him marketing his products and getting people to work really hard, and the way they did it after he passed.
Yeah, there's definitely a difference between the character of Apple after and before.
Yeah.
I think that right now it's in the Tim Cook era, and of course they're a powerhouse and they're very logical left brain, but I think in Jobs' time it was very much, how do we do both? How do we do the engineering and the creative stuff? And how do we make sure that we deliver on both of those and make really, really great products that resonate with people? But I'm sure we can get into some of that. Maybe we do like a really high level timeline.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know he was born in 1955, and
Yep.
he was adopted.
February 24th, 1955. I was listening to a little bit of the autobiography by Walter Isaacson. I didn't get too deep into it. And of course, I mean, being in technology, you hear so much about the Steve Jobs story. You watch all these movies, documentaries, read books, etc., etc. But it was really interesting because it started off in his childhood. And he was born to two young parents. One was Catholic, one was Syrian.
Yeah.
And that was not really the prototypical marriage that his biological grandparents were looking to support.
Yeah.
And so it put his biological mother, in a situation where she gave the kid up for adoption, Steve being the kid.
Right.
And Steve was adopted by his parents, who he actually considers his parents.
Yeah.
He said as much, where he was like, my biological parents were just a sperm bank. And he was like, my real parents are my adoptive parents, and anybody who sees it as something other than that is wrong. And so he was
it's an interesting take,
right?
Because of what happened in his life. But yeah.
And so he was born to young parents. They ended up giving him up for adoption. There was some battle first, because I think the mother initially wanted him back.
The regret of giving a child away is very heavy.
Right. And she even said before she gave him up, she was like, I'm hoping that I can get him back.
Yeah.
As soon as we get married
and established.
And so his adoptive parents ended up taking him in, and obviously, like, he grew up with them. His father, and now when I say father and mother, I'm talking about his adoptive parents.
Yeah.
His father was a machinist and a mechanic, and he wasn't educated formally, but he was very knowledgeable and very good with his hands and building things. And that played a heavy influence on Steve and his comfort with approaching machines and building and feeling comfortable in that space. He used to tag along with his father and work alongside him. Although he wasn't as hands-on as his father was, he liked just being around his father and spending more time in company with him. But it did play an influence on his proclivities, his interests, and technology, his interest with technology.
Yeah, I know he was. I would go to private school first, but I know he went a little bit into college, but dropped out very quickly.
Yeah.
After only attending a couple of classes.
Even before then, he was he went to, so he grew up in the Palo Alto area.
Yeah.
And because his father got transferred there for a job, and that was huge because obviously being in Silicon Valley around that time allowed him access to,
Just like it is today, really.
right?
Yeah.
But it allowed him access to different communities, people, and it basically set him up to meet the people that really shaped his whole career.
Mm-hmm.
In Wozniak and like the different clubs and parts that he was
It's true, actually,
connected with.
because I met as a teenager,
Mm-hmm.
and he was super influential in that rise to everything. Yeah.
So what's really interesting is he was really bright as a young kid, and Steve Jobs was. There was one time where he was. So initially, his parents really cultivated that too, and I think this is just a personal opinion. They really nurtured his independence, creativity, and also to the point where I see why he was acting the way that he was as an adult,
Really?
based off of the way that his biographer talked about his relationship with his parents in his childhood. It's just like, and maybe it's just being from a black African home where I'm like,
Yeah.
I would never be able to speak to my mother like that.
Right.
And they like really listened to him. So he was really able to impose his will on his parents at a very young age.
Yeah.
And he was seen as being uniquely special before they had any outward evidence of that. And I think that that's important because, one, I think it sets up his framework and his ability to push through and impose his will on different situations that we see later in life.
Yeah.
But I think it also allowed him to develop his abilities because he was operating from the belief that he was special and that he was unique. Like he was told that since before
Right.
he could even remember.
It starts to manifest because you're starting to believe it too.
Yeah, you
know?
look for confirmation in that aspect of it, and for better or worse, it set him up for a life where he was a bright guy. He took a test early on in his childhood, and he tested really, really well, and they ended up suggesting that he should skip 2 grades
Really?
when he was younger. I think it was from 4th grade to 6th grade. Or
Wow.
from 5th grade to 7th grade. And then his parents were like, that might be too much of a jump. So he ended up just skipping 1 grade and going up a year.
Okay.
But again, now he's at an early age, he's around people that are older.
Yeah.
And even though he got bullied and he was the smallest kid and all of that, he was also in a situation where he was tested and he was competing against people that were brighter. So it's like, it kind of adds to the whole idea of like, okay, if you're smart, now you're in a situation where your skills are being pushed even more, and it sets you on that trajectory where you can develop at a faster rate than your peers for your age.
And also, like, if you just have a physical stature that is obviously a year or two behind the other people in your grade, you're gonna feel like, oh, I'm singled out here.
Yeah.
I am special. I am this unique case that nobody else is like me, because the environment around him is much different than what he was going through. But
yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, he also so he went to kind of a rough school at first.
Yeah.
And then he came back to his parents and he said, I'm not going to school there. And they're like, you're going to school. And he's like, I'm just not going to show up. And we need to find a new school for me to go to. So his parents ended up taking all of their savings and finding another house in a district that had a better school. And then
Was that a private school?
I think that's what it might have been.
Yeah.
Private school.
Or something like
Yeah,
like
but it
really
was
prestigious
like,
school.
Yeah, it was one of the better schools that he got transferred into. But that was his doing. He was like
imposing that will.
Yeah, he was like, I don't want to be here. I'm going there. And if you put me there, like he's throwing that stuff out there. And I'm like, I would never be able to.
You want
frame
me to
it that
move
way,
my house?
right? Yeah.
You want me to?
It's like, boy, if you don't. Anyways, you know what I mean?
I don't personally,
Yeah.
but I will take your word for it.
Yeah,
Because same thing growing up. I would. My parents aren't going to move houses
Right.
for me to go to a different school. I
It's
mean,
like-
they might have done it before I was born
Right.
to set me up, but they're not going to do it after I'm getting
like-
bullied in school. That's
It's like,
ridiculous.
it's like, son, we're going to put you in a boxing class, karate. You're going to have to
Something.
deal with this situation. You can't just run from
That's
bullies for
life.
the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But he was a person that didn't take no for an answer. And I think that's a trait that we see at an early age that carries throughout his life. And to me, it's not just the genius in terms of writing ability and all these other things, or it's the ability to have confidence and conviction in the way that you think things should be. That really sets somebody like Steve Jobs apart from other characters that might have had his potential on paper, but never weren't able to actualize it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's interesting. It all wasn't sunshines and rainbows for Steve Jobs, but it's interesting how that kind of raw talent, right? Because he didn't have any, big achievements when he was young, but he was still, everyone's, you're special, and you're testing in these grades that are way above what a normal, kid that would actually, be around his age would actually be testing for. And so it's just interesting how the people that have that kind of conviction get other people to do the work for them. And we're going to come to this in a little bit later, but I feel like there's a really strong correlation there between like the amount of success you have and the ability you have to convince people to go with your vision.
Yeah.
Like that kind of...
There's something to peel back there. And just before we get into more of his career stuff, I think something that was really interesting with Steve Jobs, as well as a high school student, he was a very free thinker. He liked to break a lot of rules. He had a real problem with authority early on. And he would do things like play pranks and all of these different activities while he was in school. But he was also like, he wasn't just a technology person, although that was like a huge aspect of it. Speaking to some of his technological experiences, when he was young, he was very open and active in terms of reaching out to different people in industry. He reached out to
Hewlett-Packard.
Yep. And he had a conversation with Packard or Hewlett.
I don't remember which exactly it was, but he got the guy's phone number.
And he got parts, and he was able to say, hey, I'm trying to, build this, and this. And he was able to interact there. He wasn't scared to ask. He wasn't scared to reach out, which is kind of a cool anecdote looking at how things have played out.
And something to note on that, they didn't give him like an engineering position. They put him on the assembly line.
And he loved it.
And he was like, I'm now in the environment I want to be in. I'm going to take this and run with it. And most people would just be like, oh, I got my foot in the door. I'm going to stop here.
Yeah. He said that a lot of the people there didn't like that he was a kid working on the line with them.
Yeah.
He would ask him, he's like, man, I love doing this. I love this so much. He would ask some of the older guys, do you love doing this? Like, what do you like to do? And there's a story where one of the guys was like, I like to fuck. That's what I like to do.
Really?
Yeah. Just because it's like he's a teenager there with like grown men, and he's talking about how much he loves being on the assembly line, and they're like, you're so annoying. I don't want to. But it kind of just shows like his upbringing was very different, and he was around a lot of older minds that I think quieted the fear of speaking out against people that are in a position but don't really know what they're doing, or might be doing something wrong, or there might be areas for improvement.
Gray area.
Yeah, he wasn't really scared of the backlash from authority, but he was also going back to the main thing is he was very open-minded and a free thinker in the sense that when he was in school, he used to love to listen to music. He dabbled in marijuana and LSD and mushrooms, and again, there's a story of his father coming in and saying, hey, what is this? And he was like, that's marijuana. And then his father was like, I don't want you smoking this anymore. And he was like, I can't really commit to that. I can't really tell you that I'm... So he kind of just ran his household for better or worse. But he did speak very highly of his parents too. So it wasn't like he was just mad disrespecting them. I think he just really saw himself as an independent mind and bucked at any... it's just wild to have that while you're not paying rent.
Right. You know what I mean? It's like, have that, but pay rent also.
Right, exactly. So he was a very, very interesting cat, and a lot of these things are anecdotes that are out in the Steve Jobs lore, so we don't have to spend too much time on that.
No, but I think it does start here.
Stories. Yeah.
I think like the career, the entrepreneurship, the stuff that we like to cover on this podcast starts here, right? Where it's these creative mind. He also is quite technical. He can code. He knows how to do the building of a microchip, or like what you would consider like a personal computer at the time. That's why he was asking Hewlett-Packard for, parts and stuff to build his own home lab. But when you match that kind of creativity, and then you start getting around people who are very smart, you start meeting people like Wozniak, who can take that creation and then actually implement it as a technical person. The first story that pops out to me and how this kind of starts in the entrepreneurship journey is the little blue box, where Wozniak built this box that would manipulate the telephone lines. Everyone had ground lines and you had phone booths, right, that would be connected, and if you played certain tones into the phone, it would unlock long distance calling for free. And so they kind of ran this little side hustle where they'd be able to get free long distance calls just based on manipulating the telephone network. And they were able to sell this to people and kind of start the journey of, oh crap, when we make something and it's solving someone's problem, or it just is a product, we can sell this to people. It's not just a hobby.
They were they had a lot of adventures when they were younger, him and Woz. And you know, we're this founder's drive, and we're looking at the founder Steve Jobs, because he ended up being an executive and being the face of Apple. But the other part of that founding partnership was Woz.
Yeah, Wozniak, yeah.
And he's in the Steve Jobs autobiography, or the biography by Walter Isaacson, they spend a lot of time talking about Woz and his story, his background, and what set him up. I mean, his father went to Caltech, was brilliant. I think he was also in like sports there too. But he was just somebody who really prioritized and had a lot of reverence for engineering. And he put the idea in Woz's head early that it's above, the engineering is the pinnacle, it's above sales marketing. He didn't actually have any respect for the sales and marketing angle of things, and so it ended up creating a really perfect match for the two in terms of abilities and skill sets. But I don't think it was without any type of friction or stuff of that variety.
No, definitely not. I mean, they argue quite a bit, I know, and you know, had some things happen where they didn't even know about it until years later. But that kind of relationship, I think, started to mature as they started selling like the Apple Ones, which were Wozniak's hobby computer. He kind of, like you said, was like, yeah, engineering is cool and everything, but can we really sell this as a product? I think that's what Steve Jobs helped bring out in Wozniak, was like, oh no, we can actually sell this and team up to form the Apple Computing Company. And that was in the, I want to say, the 80s?
Yeah, I think late 70s, 80s.
70s, 80s?
Yeah.
And they came out with the Apple One, which was a, and then there's that story where they sold it to that company with all the peripherals. So Steve Jobs had a contract to sell, I think it was like 50 or something like that, personal computers. And he showed up with only the chips. He showed up with, the guy still bought them. Like, that's the kind of salesmanship and the kind of thing that really, I feel like, defines the trajectory that they go on too, of like getting away with stuff like that. Not only in his childhood, but now in the business world. You're starting to like cut corners. You're starting to be like, oh yeah, I promised this, but I'm gonna deliver this, and you're still gonna pay me. And keep that relationship to the point where you can continue to deliver for this customer, I guess. And add value. But it's just interesting.
So there's more of the timeline stuff. Obviously, Steve Jobs and Wozniak end up getting into business. They end up selling these Apple computers, and the trajectory is crazy. They cracked the Fortune 500 within the first 5 years, and it was, I think it's the fastest company to go and crack the Fortune 500, and the rest is history. I'm very interested in kind of talking about Steve Jobs, the character, and kind of examining his mind, decision making, and peeling back that layer. How do you want to take this one?
I mean, I think, let me see. So there is like the character, but I think there might be some key points in that career that I can probably talk about in terms of where I think there were pivots in terms of like a big change in either his personality or how he dealt with his business. So yeah, I don't know where you want to start with that, but like,
start with anything there.
Obviously, when they started, things started kicking off, and they started making a lot of money. Jobs ended up hiring the Pepsi CEO to come run the company.
Sculley.
Right. Ended up not being maybe the best decision, or maybe it was a good decision, not really sure, but in the moment he probably regretted it because there was a power struggle and he ended up getting kicked out of the company. And I think that period of time where he was running the company and then decided, okay, and a lot of startups do this. Once they get to that Fortune 500 stats, okay, let's bring in some real managers.
Yeah.
Right?
Let's bring in the adults.
Yeah, some professionals.
Yeah.
Doesn't always work, and I think it was Airbnb just had a story about that, how they were like, we tried to do the same thing, it backfired. They didn't really get the business. They didn't really understand what we were doing. But in any case, there are plenty of stories of how Steve would use his conviction and his authority in a way to like get people to do what he wanted. Specifically, like the team members that he was leading. There's many stories of him just berating people's work and calling it trash and like screaming at his employees, which is a way to run a company. Certainly is. Not a very friendly way to run a company, but it is a way to do it. And I think a pivot came when he left that company, and that's where he kind of got into the Pixar stuff and was really an investor over there. But they had such a strong creative culture, and he wasn't as involved in the day-to-day that it kind of didn't let his ego take hold of that company and suffocate it with his convictions. And I think that's what might have been happening at Apple, is some form of that, where it's like, you have great ideas, but we can't do our best work if you just keep yelling at us.
He had to grow up when he left and he got kicked out of the company. It wasn't a talent thing. It was just people didn't really like him.
Yeah, you have to be good. You have to be good to work with.
Yeah.
Because you can't do this all by yourself.
I always go back to that though, and I'm like, how do you get that way? Because somebody along the way,
Which way?
The way that he was so aggressive in
where he was yelling at people?
Because
yeah.
And I also go back and forth with that because I'm a sports person, and I've had this a lot of times where I'll come in and I'll be in like a corporate environment and people will be like, even now I've had conversations with VCs and people are like, now I don't want to hurt your feelings and I don't want you to take this the wrong way. And I'm like, you don't understand that when I remember this vividly, the first time I walked into my collegiate track meeting, one of my coaches called me a fucking idiot and said, you don't listen, like cursed me out. It's the first time I met him. And then but that was just like the context is like, I didn't feel bad about it. It was just the nature of the environment, the lay of the land. I remember my basketball coach my freshman basketball coach throwing clipboards and cursing us out when he told us something and then we didn't listen, and then he was like, and he would blow up at that stuff. We got better from it. Like we went from losing the first two games to going on a 15-game win streak because of that. I still remember that. It's because it was like, hey, we're gonna take a military approach to this stuff, and we're gonna be very, very disciplined in the way that we approach our work. And so when I leave those environments and then I go into a corporate environment, it felt like everybody was more guarded. I just feel it, and I can even now in my interactions, I'm like, I can tell you guys haven't had either a really hard team in corporate or a sports background where you had a tough coach or tough parents or anything like that, because of how tempered the interaction is before we even get to anything. It's like we're just minding our feelings and everything like that. And so I don't know how much of it is that and how much of it is him just really being like an asshole.
A prick. Yeah. It's interesting. I'm trying to think of very specific moments that I remember. Like there was this one story, I think in the biography, where I think his assistant was like, I'm gonna be late to work. There's just something with like the transportation or her kids or something, to the point where like she didn't have a car to get to work on time. And instead of just being like, listen, that's kind of your problem, you need to figure that out, I think he was just like, listen, I don't want to deal with this right now. Here's a free Jaguar. So you can just drive to work whenever you need to. And so it's like being able to make those kind of decisions where it's like, I don't have to deal with this. Here's an $80,000 car. Just get to work on time. It's like that's coupled with the fact that in, 2008, when their first cloud service launched, he got the entire team in a conference room and was like, you guys should all be mad at each other because this thing sucks. It's like that kind of thing where I agree with you in the fact that like sometimes a hard coach is needed, but I think if it was that kind of culture day in and day out, it's hard to come back with 100% energy. If you know that everything is going to be just push down and like criticize. It's like,
right, yeah.
and the tough part for me is that he wasn't the one actually building. Like, he could tell them it was a shit product, and yeah, anyone could tell you it was a shit product, but he didn't have the chops to go and build it himself either. And so it's like an interesting, you know, discussion you have between a creative and like an implementer, where it's like, yeah, we can all agree that this is not good, but if you can't do it yourself, then you're not really helping the, you know, or you can't like point us in a way of a solution. But then you're just complaining for complaining sake.
Do you actually think it's that easy to say something isn't good? Because I think, all right, from the comfort of your home where you're online and you leave a comment and it's anonymous, yes, that's really easy to troll and say this sucks, etc., etc. But somebody, when you're in a meeting room and you're speaking with different people, it's not, I don't think it's as easy for people to say this thing sucks and this is why it sucks and you can do better. Like, I don't think that that's a common thing. I think that takes like, and to stand on that conviction too.
Yeah, I guess I don't think it's a problem necessarily. It's the way you go about it.
Okay.
You know, I think especially founders should have strong convictions and should have a high level of like a high bar for their team.
Yeah.
But if you're constantly like every little thing they're doing is bad, right? There's a way to approach that, and maybe he wasn't maybe he wasn't micromanaging them to the point where it was those small details.
Yeah.
Because all we really hear about is like these big temper tantrums that blow up. But I really do think there's like a way to approach it where you can have high standards and do it in a way that people feel like good about putting forth like their best effort instead of ruling by fear. I think a lot of it was like, oh shit, I'm gonna lose my job. I'm worried that if I don't do this, like, I'm gonna get fired. I don't know if you get the best results out of people that way. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't think you do. I don't think you do. But I do think that being very stern is. I think that that's taken for granted as well, as being the enemy in the room. Like, one thing that going back to my freshman basketball, back in my day. No, but my one thing that my coach did really well, because he was a military guy, West Point, all that stuff. Yeah, he made himself the enemy early on.
Right.
So we all bonded as a team.
Right.
And he was very good to not attack people for things that weren't tied to basketball or
that's also
court
good
stuff, right?
Yeah.
It was more about like the game in the business world to be the product and less about the people, right?
Yeah.
And so, but he was somebody where it's like we'd go there and we'd be like, man, if we mess up right now, there's going to be repercussions. And it's every little thing he would stay on us. But it ended up paying out. And so like that's not something that I'm aware that if he was aware of that. Now, another military voice in basketball is Bobby Knight, who, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he was a basketball coach at Indiana.
Really yeah.
And later, I can't remember the other place later, but he was the guy that was like throwing clipboards in the middle of games, cursing people out, and very, very much where it's like some people are like, you didn't need to be that aggressive right there. Like, you didn't need to be that mean. And if that's how Steve Jobs was, then like, you know, I don't really want to be around that. Especially it's like,
well, how much are you willing to tolerate for that amount of success or that amount of greatness?
So one thing that Steve Jobs also says is that he is willing to pay an outsized amount for talent.
Yes.
So he would say that, like, he said that when you are dealing with people, there are people where I think it was him that was talking about having developers that were like 1,000x better and engineers that are just that much better. And so he's like, but with that, you have to deal with the personalities there. So there's also a world where, and I don't have any anecdotes of this, but where Steve Jobs is also dealing with rough personalities.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. It's interesting when you were talking about the kind of having the authority person the enemy, the common enemy for the team. That's a really interesting leadership style. But I'm trying to think of another person that might have done that.
Like early on, I'll give you another example. Is and this isn't a real situation, but it's Remember the Titans, the character that Denzel played there, when he brought them all to that retreat, and he was dealing with white players and black players, and there was a lot of racism in the scene of the movie. And he was just really tough on them and never let anything slip. He was like, you drop a pass, you run a mile. You do this, you run a mile.
Yeah.
And it brought the team together because he was seen as their antagonist
while
so they were on their retreat. Yeah.
It's funny that some people, and I wouldn't recommend this. This is a kind of a side tangent. Some people say that they should do that with their pets. Like if your pets don't get along, you like put them together in like a really small room and like freak them out. And it's like they're gonna go through a traumatic experience together. Yeah, they're gonna bond. It's like a terrible way to do it. But I have seen comments like that. I'm like, I just don't know if like the amount of trauma is worth the success. But the other thing I was thinking about is the coaches that you have and the people that are hard on you. They're gonna be hard on you on practice too. Like they're gonna see you in practice. They're gonna know, hey, Tendo's not hitting this jumper in the game. Yeah. And so what also kind of confused me was the fact that the product in 2008 launched their MobileMe service with cloud provider. They launched it and it was a flop. It was like, did you guys even where was the practice at? And was Steve Jobs at the practice? Because it feels like those kind of things where you launch a service and you're losing emails. Yeah. Your web servers are going down. Like
talk about that a little bit more though. Like the whole product.
So the product was basically the first version of iCloud, right? Everyone knows iCloud. Take a photo, automatically backed up. I can switch devices really easily because everything is off my device. And it's synced to a spot where Apple owns it, but it's my data. This was the first version of that, right? Where you could offload that stuff to the cloud, essentially. They started with email. The product was so bad, people started losing their emails. Like they would have an email and in their inbox and it would be deleted.
And it's gone.
Yeah. They would have like web server, like those sites where you'd access the stuff on the cloud crash. People just couldn't get to their stuff. It was such a flop that this is where Steve Jobs kind of came in and told everybody, you guys should all be mad at yourselves, and then fired the lead of the team. I'm curious if that practice was happening before the product launch. I know we do a lot of testing with our product and we still miss things. So I'm just curious, also from that context.
I wonder, because he was pretty sick at that point too, right? When they started releasing this.
Yeah, somewhat. So I wonder how some could argue he was sick his whole life.
I wonder how involved he might have been at that time.
Right, maybe he was taking a step back and just came in to say, no, this sucks. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I know.
Because if he was just like, you guys should be mad at yourself, when it wasn't him blowing up and throwing things and crying and all that. Because he was just an emotional dude. He would also cry at the dime of a hat or the drop of a hat. And I think like maybe at that point he wasn't
a little more separated.
Yeah.
Which kind of plays into the whole like, I'm going to impose my will on whatever's happening. He had a very treatable form of cancer. Multiple physicians have come out and said he would probably still be alive today if we were able to do what we wanted to do. After his diagnosis, he tried some holistic remedies. Obviously, they did not work out, and he actually passed in 2011. But I think that's just another example of like, I'm going to bend reality to my will. And reality was like, not this time, buddy. Which is unfortunate, because I think he would still be alive doing amazing things today with Apple and Tim Cook.
Yeah, I haven't looked into his whole cancer diagnosis. Obviously, I know that he opted for holistic treatment as opposed to
it was about 9 months where he got the diagnosis, tried to treat it himself, and at the 9-month mark he said, okay, I give up, I'm doing surgery. But those 9 months were critical to actually saving his life.
Nice.
Unfortunately.
But I guess going back to the whole idea of him being like feisty is another thing too. Is a lot of times reputations will carry over from your younger years. And so Steve Jobs at 25, 26, 29, getting fired from Apple, and him later in life are different Steve Jobs.
They are.
He's a smart guy, so I'm sure that he learned how to better navigate and manage his teams and manage people. Maybe focus efforts towards and anger towards products versus people.
Right.
But I don't know how much of that stuff is covered either.
I think just from the numbers that I've seen, the reason that none of that stuff happened at Pixar was a couple of things in terms of they had a very established culture. And basically the two top ones I think are they had a very established culture of creative culture with leaders in positions of authority in the business already. And Steve was only working there like 1 or 2 days a week. He was not there 5 days a week.
Yeah, he was more the financier.
Yeah, more of an investor.
Yeah.
And I think when you do that, your ego gets a little bit detached from...
He also just got fired from his own company.
And I think, yeah, exactly.
But my point being is that even in the Apple phase 2, when he came back and he had the reins of Apple again, I'm almost like, I don't know the intricacies of the stories, but I'm almost
sure that he wasn't the same. I'm positive that he
Yeah,
wasn't the same leader that he was before.
No, he changed dramatically.
Yeah. Where it's like I could have been right, but I didn't have the, like, people just didn't like me.
Didn't have the buy-in.
Yeah, you didn't have the buy-in.
Didn't have the buy-in.
And eventually, it's like people start saying, like, hey, like, I don't want to be around this, and it's not worth it. And if you have your top talent saying it's not worth it, you have to pay attention to that. Where you're like, man, I'm better than him, but they don't want me here just because they don't like me.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a big
It's
moment
underrated.
to look at that and say, man, like, it's
underrated.
Yeah.
Especially when you're not as successful as Steve Jobs was at 30, right? Coming back, if you are trying to scrap your way through things, like the amount of relationships that you can build or break, depending on your attitude, when you're just starting out, can make the difference between a really successful career and a really bad one. And so I think it's underrated, the way that, you know, you treat people. I would rather be guarded, you know, and be nicer than come in there with, you know, like a bull in a china shop, trying to impose my will on people.
So before we get into super secret stuff, on super secret, I want to get into the reality distortion field. Those things, because I think that stuff is fascinating.
That kind of messes with manifestation and kind of thing, yeah.
And like he was a Zen Buddhist,
right?
A very open and free thinker again. And so I really want to kind of peel that layer back on the super secret episode. But before we do, I want to talk a little bit more on his mindset, maybe what drives him, how he might respond, how he might be if he was born of this era. Say maybe born in the 90s and is coming up to
in the AI
wave. In the AI boom. And then, because I mean, he was also somebody who introduced Siri pretty early on and kind of saw where some of the stuff is going.
They dropped the ball on that, but, you know, it is what it is.
But yeah, I kind of want to explore some of his mindset and how we think he might operate in another world. Because just to throw one more thing out there, he was really good friends with Larry Ellison. They were buddies.
Yeah.
They go way back. And I think it's fascinating because Larry Ellison has found a space in this world right now. He's worth over $100 billion. He hasn't gone away. He's very competitive.
Not as much in the limelight I think Steve Jobs would be.
Right.
But still has a spot.
And then in a world where there's also an Elon Musk, who's this new entrepreneur, where does a Steve Jobs fit in? Knowing all of his skills, abilities, and his drive to want to release great products. So wherever you want to start from with that is cool with me.
I think he would still be running Apple, because I don't believe, and this is kind of a side, I don't believe that Tim Cook has really grabbed the reins yet. I mean, other people might disagree. I think Steve, when he had the company, had the reins firmly and this is the way we're going, leading the way forward. I don't necessarily feel that way with Tim in the position. It kind of feels like Tim's still waiting for Steve to come back. So I'm like, I can almost imagine him in the leadership role at Apple and continuing to push out products and make those teams better. I think he'd probably be a fan of liquid glass. But I also think maybe because the implementation or the design. The design I think he'd love.
The design and the look and the feel is cool, but
the actual usability. No.
So he's somebody who said that design is more than looks and aesthetic. Design is function and form. And I believe
lost
that. Right. And so it's like they're doing a half design job. But I think those are the types of things that he used to blow up about that Tim Cook might not be blowing up about.
Exactly.
And so you can see a drop in the quality of the products when you remove that
attention to detail.
Exactly.
And whatever it is. The other thing I was going to say is that you do kind of have a window into what this world would look like because Jony Ive is now working with Sam Altman. Jony Ive was brought into Apple and created some of the most stunning products you'll ever see come out of Apple. He was responsible for these, you know, good launches of the MacBook and a lot of these things that give it that design feel. Now he's working with Sam to kind of come up with what's going to be the next wearable, you know, assistant. And so that is, I think, an interesting play in terms of where that Apple mindset, that design mindset, might be playing out in the AI world.
Yeah, it's so interesting because one of the stories that was really
famed when it comes to Steve Jobs is how he talks about how his father, when he was woodworking, he would work on the details that aren't. he would work on like the areas that aren't shown on a piece with just as much care as like the so you'd work on like the back of a dresser with just as much care as you would work on the front, even though you're not going to see the back. He's
right.
Because that's craftsmanship.
Right.
And I think that translates in every industry.
Yeah.
Like you can't get away from that stuff. And I think that design mind goes such a long way. It's like being very particular. There's also that story, I think it was with Jony Ives, where he was saying, he was like, they had this back and forth about how he thought Steve was being too hard on the team. And he said, Steve was like, oh, I thought you cared more about the product. You're being selfish right now.
Right.
You care about how people like you. And you're putting that
above
the product. So
yeah. It's one way to do it.
Yeah, it's one way to look at it. I think it translates though across industries. And I think like that craftsmanship is such a core component of his mindset. And I think that that's lost at Apple. I agree with that. Yeah. Even like small things in terms of like the marketing. This is something maybe we can use as a transition to get into like the super secret. But I watched that marketing video when Steve Jobs talks about what marketing is and how he's introducing the new Think Different campaign.
Right.
I watch that video all the time.
It's a good one.
Where he's just talking about how marketing is about values, and he uses the Nike as a comparison. Watch the Phil Knight episode.
Yep.
But he uses Nike as a comparison to talk about how they don't talk about the product in the features, and they don't list off the little specs of the shoe. Mm-hmm. They talk about the people that they're serving, the people that they're honoring, and the ideas that they're honoring, and they let that be the vehicle for the marketing.
Right.
The example in the Think Different campaign is they didn't talk about the computers. The whole campaign was showing creatives across
changing
time,
the world.
Changing the world.
Yeah.
He said because the people that are crazy enough to believe that they can change the world are the ones that often do.
Yep.
And that to me is marketing. It's how you engage with the people that you want to buy your product and inspire them. And it's so noticeable when you see some of the newer advertisements. In the last couple of years, they've started to change this and go back to their...
But there was a period there where it was like, look at my GPU size, look at my memory size.
Right.
It's like,
look at the speed of this process.
It's a lot of numbers.
Right. And it's like the average person who's buying the product isn't going to be paying attention to that stuff.
Right.
There's going to be people that do, but that's not the people that really go out in waves and commit, and that's not the people that feel when you drop a product. It's just the people that, you know,
you've captured and aren't going away.
So yeah, Steve Jobs in today's day and age, I think is still thrives, and I think it's because of what drives him, which is I think the craftsmanship, the attention to detail, design, the want to go and create products that resonate and that can stand the test of time.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, do you have any thoughts? Any other thoughts?
I do have some other thoughts, but I'm going to bring those up in the super secret.
Okay.
And how these kinds of attentions to details aren't always applied with Steve Jobs. He definitely selects and chooses when he wants to do this kind of thing.
Oh.
And it's just interesting, right? There's a lot of pivot points that we talked about in this episode, but yeah, I'm going to go into some of those on the super secret, I think.
Yeah.
So, anything else you want to say?
Nah, man, let's jump right into the super secret.
All right, check us out there.
Yeah.
And that'll be in the description below. And on Constants.com.
Where?
Constants.com.
Constants.com.
All right.
Constants.com.
We'll see you next week.
Peace.